Hi there everyone and welcome back to a brand new video. This is my tier list for every single year of Bionicle. Now, the majority of these years I do indeed like all across, so no matter what letter grade they end up getting, there's a special place in my heart for almost every single one of these years. For the ones that are not included, you can probably guess which ones they are by the end of the video. According to my YouTube analytics, about 70% of you that are watching these videos are not actually subscribed to the channel. Please feel free to subscribe if you do enjoy the content, and make sure to leave a like as engagement really helps out the channel. And of course, as always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you do decide to comment on the video, please let me know your ranking of each Bionicle year, or feel free to tell me that my opinion is bad. My personal ranking of these years also fluctuate a little bit, not drastically by any means, but depending on how I feel either a certain week or a certain day, or maybe even like over across a few years, my ranking might change here and there. But overall, I think this is generally a ranking that I quite like, or at least that's how I feel right now. So who knows, maybe I'll regret this video in the future. So this is not just including the sets, this is also including the story, third-party media as well, and just how it was overall as a general year. We are going from the earliest years up until the final years here. And of course, we're going to start off with 2001. This was a fantastic year for Bionicle. It was a fantastic start, and this got LEGO out of a lot of trouble as well. I am putting this one in the S tier. It's unquestionable that this is probably one of the best, if not the best year for the brand. I absolutely love it, and really, the only thing that's missing from this year are enemy grunts, the little guys that you can fight. Because sometimes you can't afford the Rahi set, sometimes you don't have room for them. So you need like smaller bad guys to fight. And that's where 2002 comes in here. So I don't think 2002 is as great as a year as 2001. But this is still another fantastic year. It carries over a lot of the similar principles of the collecting of Krana, which is quite similar to the collecting of Kanohi from 2001, and the Borak are just fantastic sets. This was, however, the beginning of the clone gimmick that LEGO would sometimes use for the Toa and other sets going forward. But regardless, the Borak, with what they were meant to be, they're meant to be these bug little grunts within waves with different factions, and I think this was a fantastic, well-executed year. I'm putting this in the A tier. It's one of my favorites. It's not quite as good as 2001, but it's still a very, very solid year. The next year we have here is Bionicle 2003. This was another very important year for Bionicle. This was the final year of the Golden Age. We got our first film with this one as well. The year did start off with a recycle of the Borak, since the Borak were so popular. With 2003, there is a lot of fantastic elements from this year. Specifically, the Titans are really, really great, and the Rakshi were revolutionary in terms of bringing a whole new level of posability towards the Bionicle figures going forward. The first half of the year was a reskin of 2002's first half of its year, just because of how popular the Borak were. With the introduction of the Borak Cal, they were a little bit more unified visually than the original Borak. A little bit more boring to look at in my opinion, just because it strips away a little bit more of their colors. They have like one main color and then their secondary is silver all across, and also you can't really see their Krana within their shells, so that's also unfortunate, but it makes sense within the story. And the Borak Cal saga is a pretty underrated part of 2003. It doesn't really get mentioned. It gets overshadowed by the film a lot. I'm gonna put this one probably, it's hard to say. If I could have a tier in between A and B, I would put it there, but to give it the credit it deserves, I will put it at the A tier for now, just under 2002. So the next year is 2004. 2004 is one of my favorite years in Bionicle. It's also one of the most underrated years in terms of lore. We got a lot of really cool developments that I quite like, a lot of focus that I am drawn to within the Bionicle lore. It comes from these years. A lot of stories that we like may not have come from this year specifically, but this Metro Nui landscape and a lot of these new characters that were ended up giving us a lot to work with later on in Bionicle's story. I love Metro Nui. I quite like the Titans, like them a little bit more than the 2003 Titans, and that's a pretty big compliment. The Toa, I have a soft spot for the Toa, but I do recognize their flaws, and I definitely think the writing was an overall improvement from the previous years, as it got a little bit more just a slightly bit more mature, and they took things a little bit more seriously versus how it was before, where it was very folktale, fairy tale, legend oriented, being really in touch with nature, in tune with nature. This one leans a lot more into the robotical and cybernetic side of Bionicle, obviously with Metro Nui, the Vaki being drones. But this was a very, very underrated year. It does take some step backs from 2003, unfortunately, a bit, so I can't put it above 2003, but I am probably going to put it in the high B tier. There's a lot of things I really love about it personally, but these ones are just a little bit more superior, unfortunately, but I still really love 2004. Next we have 2005. 2005 is a bit of a tricky year because, again, we got some pretty good stories. The sets are really riding off the Borak gimmick where they are all clones, not just the grunts this time, but also the Toa, so that's not really too fantastic. The Titans are actually quite good. They are the best part of this year, but the story in the film is... I go back and forth of which films I like more, but the 2005 film, Web of Shadows, is actually quite good and quite entertaining. It's probably the most rewatchable one, if I have to be honest, even though I still think Legends of Metro Nui is my favorite one. I'm going to put this one probably in the C tier, just because of how lazy the design team kind of got, with like especially how basic the Hordika were. And I think the Hordika build would have been fine for one of the Toa, but the fact that it's all 6 is kind of weird, and also, not to mention, they got rid of the Metru head for some reason here. I think they were trying to get rid of that head mold for some reason, even though it was a really, really good head mold. But regardless, this is where it goes. I do not regret this decision. Alright, next up we have 2006. This was my first year of Bionicle, so it's definitely a big bias for me, I'm not gonna lie. But this was a unique turning point in the story where they kind of went back to the source a bit, where they brought in a new mysterious island that wasn't like a huge Blade Runner-esque city like Metro Nui. This one's back to the core, where it's a mysterious island, there's a mask they gotta find. But also with the introduction of the Paraka, they were almost fighting reverse Toa, so that was also quite cool. This is where the story was getting really, really good. This is when everything was starting to come together and things were starting to lean into the climax. The Toa, I do quite like the Toa and Nika, despite their weird creative decision with the head thing. I think it's fine just for the 1 year and how it serves in the story. I think it's okay as a gimmick. Obviously, if that was what they were going to do going forward, I would not have been happy with that. I really love the Paraka. The Batoran builds were... yeah, they're definitely not like my favorite, but in terms of the story, it all makes sense. We also got Bionicle Heroes that year. That was a big one as well. I'm definitely putting this one probably... this one's tough. I'm going to put it under 2002, but the Titans were also like fantastic and some of the best we've ever gotten. I'm going to put it at the A tier here above 2002. That might be controversial for some people. This is just my personal opinion, though, so try not to take it too seriously. Okay, next up we have 2007, another very, very strong year in Bionicle. This was another point where the story was getting towards a climactic point. This is probably the climax of the ignition years of Bionicle. The Titans are arguably maybe a little bit better than the 2006 Titans, but I still think I like the 2006 Titans more. There's a lot more Titans in this year, though, such as Karzani, which I'm happy to say that I have. I have every Titan. I have every set from 2007. So as someone that has either the majority of these sets, if not them all, from all these previous years, and talking about this one as well, this one is definitely a very high up tier. I am going to, however, put this one right below 2002. Or I am keeping it above 2003. It's a tough call between all these, but you just have to realize how revolutionary 2002 was. I have to give it a lot of respect. And also, maybe a controversial opinion, some of the Mari builds are quite questionable. There's a lot of weird, questionable decisions there. The Baraki are great. The Toa are a little bit more questionable than I think a lot of people would like to realize. but again, it's fine to just sit there, in my opinion. I think that's okay. The playsets were good as well. I don't think they're like a necessary thing for Bionicle, and the LEGO group did not think they were necessary going forward either. But yeah, that's where I'll put this one for now. The story's really good, but I just like 06 quite a bit, as you can tell. Alright, now the next one up is 2008. This one is generally a pretty underrated year with Bionicle. This was like Endgame before Endgame. And while I think the story was good, this was also the year where we got a lot of weird story retcons for Bionicle. And this was definitely when Greg made a lot more bold moves, especially with changing things that we were already familiar with. We did, however, get a lot of quite fantastic serials this year. Probably some of my favorite stories within the entire theme. But a lot of those were built off of years previous from this. So while these may have came out in 2008, you do have to respect the groundwork that was made from the previous years. To actually focus on the sets for a minute, I don't think the Toa are as bad as a lot of people kind of have made them out to be. They are not good representations of the Toa Nuva. That's just my personal opinion. They do not look like how they should. Looking at how this was originally supposed to be another team for the Toa Mari / Toa Nika, you can probably understand why they don't look the way they're supposed to. I'm going to put this one in the C tier with 2005, but being like just a little bit better in 2005, because I do think they dropped the ball a little bit with 2005, and I think that's overall a similar opinion to what a lot of people have regarding 2005. Okay, next up is 2009. 2009, I think, is another underrated year for Bionicle. This one doesn't really get a lot of focus on because it's the first year outside of the Matoran universe on Bara Magna, where we got introduced to Glatorian and Ogori. And this is like where Greg started to take a little bit of a different path with the story. It was supposed to end with 2008, but the sales were so good that they decided to give it another year. And you had basically a soft reboot where all the previous lore was still canon. It was in a completely different landscape, different characters, aside from one of which we have only heard things about but have never actually met, that being Madanui. And I think the story for 2009 is pretty underrated, and the sets are also underrated too. But it kind of carries over a lot of the weird flaws from 2008 with like the plastic quality. And while I think these are probably some of the best use of the Anika system, I don't think the Glatorian are like all that much to write home about. I think they're still great. I like owning most of them, but I definitely think previous sets have been better. Not to mention this gets rid of Kanohi, which is a pretty big misstep in my opinion, because when Bionicle started out, it was all about the masks. Even in the Ignition years and the Metro Nui years, like, a lot of people's complaints is that they kind of took away the collect all the mask elements, but at least they were still about the mask, and to not have that is just kind of weird. You can tell with a lot of these design choices going forward that these would be the ones that they would carry into Hero Factory. But with all that being said, I do think 2009 is a pretty underrated year. I'll probably put it above 2005, just because 2005 lacked quite a bit with the sets. Okay, next up is 2010, and I'm going to be very, very blunt here. I'm putting it right here. I understand that we were not supposed to get another year after 2009, which is funny because they were like, oh, the brand's doing good, give it another year, when they started almost from scratch again. And then they were like, psych, just kidding. You gotta end things now. So, considering everything that happened with this year, the story at least is quite good. Especially when you consider how many things were rushed or were cut. I think it deserves a lot more credit than it gets. The sets, I mean, like, there's no way around it. There's Matoran builds, specifically Av Matoran. And while they're better on the Av Matoran / Ogori side of things, they're still lows. And yeah, I think that's enough said. Okay, next up is 2015. And this year, for 2015, the saving grace of it was the anticipation. If you were around back then, you probably remember how big of a deal 2015 was. 2015 brought in a lot of new fans that maybe grew up with it, but, you know, they weren't, like, really into Bionicle yet, and this was their new opportunity to get reintroduced to it in a new way with modern parts. And this is where a lot of Hero Factory fans converted over to Bionicle. And at this point, there was still a huge Bionicle community. This is probably when the Bionicle community was the most big, if not most popular. The payoff was really not there at all. The story was an absolute mess. There's thousands of continuity errors. They didn't even bother, to say that they even had a story team is kind of funny, because there's so many contradictions throughout comics and books of what the story actually was. And then, of course, it was 2016 that came around later. They changed some things here and there, and things didn't line up still. Basically, everything good about this year was because of years prior. And while the builds were quite good Hero Factory sets, I don't think they were that great Bionicle sets, but I think Hero Factory is actually a better theme than Bionicle Generation 2. The shift in the art style was quite questionable. I'm not really a fan of CCBS as a system either. But like I said before, the payoff was goofy. The animations were not nearly as good as the Mighty Nui online game ones. So this is going straight into the D tier. There's no way around it. Last and certainly least is Bionicle 2016. Bionicle Generation 2 was supposed to last a minimum of 3 years. This was the same deal that Bionicle Generation 1 had, but obviously due to popularity and high sales, they kept the theme going up until the end, and they only ended Bionicle Generation 1 because they wanted to end it on a high note when sales were still good, and Bionicle had a very, very fantastic reputation amongst retailers. When I first saw what Toa looked like for 2016, I was in high school. I was in class with my friend, and I don't remember if I opened Instagram or another social media app, and I saw them, and I was just like, I don't have to get the whole wave, I guess. And a lot of the G2 builds, they started off with a lot of diversity, but in 2016, they kind of became very, very samey. It just didn't really look like Bionicle to me and a lot of people. Majority rules, I guess, because this year sold so horribly that they just ended the theme. It was either... So here are two things that may have happened. 2015 either bombed, which I'm kind of apprehensive about that one because of how many people I knew actually got sets. I even completed the wave when that came out, and I was a kid in high school that didn't have a lot of money. But 2016, this was when sales were already low. You've now alienated and put off a lot of reoccurring fans to not complete the year, which is not good. If you're not getting base sales to begin with average consumers, and then you piss off the people that are keeping the lights on, then that's just not good. And don't even get me started about Journey to 1. Maybe I'll make a video about it someday. But if there was an F tier, I'd put it in the F tier, but it's going right in the D tier, below 2015. So here I have every single year of Bionicle ranked. Let me know what you think of this ranking in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video. And if you want to see more videos like these, please subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one.